All right, 7:02, call the meeting to order. Let me pull up the, welcome back, Rob. Let me pull up our agenda and welcome back, Sean. Is he still here? I think it's coming
I'm here,
back.
yeah, thank you.
Hi. So I'll just pull up our agenda, just starting off with public participation. Is there anyone who would like to say anything?
This is Carol Zubek from 294 Main Street. And I thought I'd share some good news. I was able to get a green manual, green sailing manual, and also a green sailing burgee, very much embraced by the current Commodore, Vice Commodore, who are in, the Vice Commodore is the buildings and grounds person, and the membership committee, which is a couple that's been there for over 25 years. They've loved the stuff that I've been slowly implementing. So we were able to, they even wanted to post the green sailing version in a more prominent place than I originally wanted. So very excited that it finally pays off.
Carol, can you tell me more about what that means? What the green sailing means?
It's like a 100-page guideline, and actually it's founded by John D. Rockefeller. It's called Sailors for the Sea, and it's out of Newport, and it helps with guidelines on proper way to clean without very high performance cleaning. So there's not sacrificing, and the fact that when you fix your oil leaks, you actually save a lot of money. And there's these, so it just is very a whole slew of different things to make sure you do.
Cool.
And it includes recycling, like the ropes and the sails. There's places that actually make gorgeous purses and large bags out of the old sails. So there's a lot of repurposing that can be done with different equipment.
And is this being used at the yacht club, or is it sort of being used in Wakefield, or is it a broader sort of regional?
It's at the yacht club, but it's other yacht clubs opt in for it.
Cool. Good work. Thank you. I don't see other members of the public right now. So we'll move on to item 3, which is approval of the minutes. Thank you, Robin, for that was a lot of that was a lot to capture last meeting. So I really appreciate it. Any feedback to Robin on the minutes?
So I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Sorry, was that you, Susie?
It was.
Thank you.
All right, I'll call roll on the order that I see people's pictures. So Susie, you're up first.
Yes.
I'm next. Yes. Robin?
Yes.
Anne?
I'm going to abstain.
Julie?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Sean?
I wasn't at August 19th, so I'll abstain.
Okay. Rob?
I wasn't there at August 19th, so I abstained too.
And Tom?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So in follow-up to the last meeting, one thing that we talked about last time was to have Robin give us a little bit of an update about the sort of a little bit of education maybe about the opportunity and thinking about the high school building and the sort of process of the buildings. And so she's put together some slides that to help us understand what the process is and thinking about how we might have an opportunity. And so, Robin, do you want me to pull up slides or do you want to do it?
No, I have them, if that's okay.
Yeah, great. I think you
Alright.
should be able to share because I made you a co-host.
All right, so the dog decided to start barking as
course.
I, all right.
So first of all, for those of you who weren't at the last meeting, any questions or any thoughts before we get started about what we're doing here?
All right, and do you guys see a slide that's just kind of an intro slide, or do you see lots of things?
We see sustainable buildings, your intro
Perfect.
slide.
All right, so just a little background, because I think most of you guys know, but for those who don't, my day job is I'm actually a project manager architect for a company called Perkins Eastman Architects. We are an international firm, but here in Boston, we are in market sectors, including public K-12 schools, and other things, and it's not meant to be a marketing thing, but just so you know, my day job is public schools, but we did not go after the Wakefield High School project, so I feel comfortable talking about it without any issues. But so I put together kind of an intro slideshow. It's going to have more than I'm going to talk about, but I'll give it to you guys as a reference guide. But my goal is to introduce some terms that we'll need to learn and be able to speak to. The architects for the project are going to definitely get into it more, but the more we kind of are comfortable with some terms sooner, I think it will do better. So I'm going to start with a little bit about rating systems and then go into some vocabulary and then talk a little bit about when and how we can talk to the high school project. So please interrupt. I've not given this presentation before, so hopefully it goes smoothly, but I kind of thought it would be a starting point. Any opening questions or? All right. So rating systems, like all of you guys probably deal with your day job, is a whole lot of letters, and I forget which letters people don't know are acronyms. So here are some, as like I said, as a reference guide, and I myself don't always remember what they mean. In the rating system world for architecture and buildings, the one that's the largest globally is the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED certificate. It's been around for about 20 years. I'm not saying that this is the one is for Wakefield, but it's just the one you see most of and the one I know the most about. We're in LEED Vision 4, so since it was created 20 years ago, it's been constantly evaluated and then pushing its own envelope. So things that were considered high performing sustainable buildings 20 years ago now barely would qualify under their standards. You know, they're as technology and acceptance and availability of things become more available, they push it further. The things that it's looking for are an integrated design process, where you locate your project and how you get to it, the sustainable site, and that can be acknowledging, you know, are you cutting down trees for it? Is it a former, you know, hazardous site that you're cleaning up and improving? It looks to the building and the site of use of water, energy, and its impact on the atmosphere, the materials in the project and in the building, and then indoor environmental quality. So that starts to speak to both construction quality, but then also the occupants and life cycle. Buildings that go after LEED are started certified, then you go to silver, gold, and platinum. So, and there's ranges between them. LEED can be used for new construction, existing buildings, interiors, and then newer ones are called operations and maintenance. So, you know, one was about the construction project, and then now they're like, well, hey, how are you maintaining this building? And they're each their own systems. You'll hear someone call themselves a LEED AP. I am one of them. It means we took a test. We're an accredited professional to be able to talk about the rating system, but I constantly have to go back to the books to make sure I get it right. And this is what kind of we use as a checklist and how we go from ideas to knowing if we need it and then what kind of category in it. So I know it's probably small on your screen, but just so you know, at the start of a project, we say, is it yes, we're going to get the project or the credit, you know, how much open space are we providing to the project, how many bicycle racks we provide, maybe and no, because no project is going to get every credit. And some categories, they have ranges on how much you provide towards that credit. And so it just adds up in a simple kind of spreadsheet, simple, but kind of a joke, but you know, it's all an Excel spreadsheet and it spits it out and tells you where you sit. The second most common for public schools in Massachusetts is actually the chip system. In preparing this, I was curious what the Galvin did because I wasn't really involved when it was being built. And it turns out the Galvin used the chip system. So instead of LEED, to anyone who knew about the project. So similar to LEED, it looks at integration of systems, operation and how it's maintained, indoor air quality, the energy used to operate the building, how much water is used on its day-to-day use, what's the site look like, materials and waste management. So for folks that are going through a state-funded school project, these are kind of the these are two levels of buildings that you can go after for certification. But that's not it, and there's things to be learned about other ones, which is why I want to mention them. Oh, this is their scorecard. So similar to LEED, they have a scorecard. Again, yes, maybe, how many points adds up on the bottom and says if you qualify to say you're a CHIPS building, you're verified. The International Living Building Institute has created something called the Living Building Challenge. And they, instead of referring to things in categories, they use performance categories, and they're in the pedal form. They're very biometric in their kind of thinking. And one of the things that's unique to them as opposed to LEED or CHIPS is they talk about beauty and happiness. So it becomes it's a little softer of a credit system because it's kind of looking at the building and its impact to humans on a different way. And they also have levels that start to look at the zero carbon, zero energy, overall building, and then the pedal system that they have. It's a newer system. There are beautiful buildings across the country that use this. You can actually do this and LEED. I mean, because they look at things differently. There's reasons to use some, things from one system to another. And LEED also allows you to do something called innovation points. So it's a category, it's not on their chart. And so if you learn something from Living Building Challenge, such as the happiness or maybe the beauty category, you can apply to LEED and ask them if they can consider it as a way to look at the overall project holistically. And then there's some more. So you may start to hear things about well rating systems. That's actually, I've heard, I don't know if the rest of the world hears about it, especially in the sense of COVID, because they really focus on indoor air quality and what you're doing to protect the occupants occupying the building. There's also something called green globes, which the federal government was using for a while. Passive house, which tends to be more focused on envelope, which is why it works well with other systems because they have standards to make sure your building's not leaking at a higher level than anyone else's. There's the BRIM system and a GIGA, which makes reset. So, there's everybody kind of has made little, rating systems, and there's pros and cons. And like I said, they focus things differently. But as the project gets started for the Wakefield tie, I imagine all things are open for discussion, and we can learn more about them from each other. So some key words that are related to the rating system, but not directly, that you hear thrown around, and I want to kind of put some definitions, although when putting this together and with the help of coworkers, they said, within this, people disagree exactly on the definitions, but net zero can mean, if you just hear the word net zero, that actually isn't enough for you to understand what they're talking about, because there's net zero greenhouse gas emissions, there's net zero carbon, there's a triple net zero, which is net zero energy, water, and waste, and then net zero buildings. And so, emissions is not the same thing as carbon, and carbon is about, from a building standpoint, is recognizing that on-site uses and how you procure things, balancing out with the renewables that you either have on-site or you purchase. And of course, some people, there's debates, on if you do too many offsets, off-site buying of things, are you really net, the carbon, it's not the same intent. So there's disagreements, but the intent is all there, right? To reduce the carbon impact. A growing thing that is coming out, you hear more of in my world, but embodied carbon. So this is looking at the effort to build a building and its impact on carbon. So this is from the moment the ingredient is thought of, how much its carbon is used to do what it needs to do, be processed, brought to your site, manipulated, installed, and its afterlife. And product selection, especially when it comes to structural, there's huge differences on a wood frame building versus concrete in terms of embodied carbon. So some advocates are pushing to more use of wood because concrete has a lot. And then concrete folks, of course, are saying, oh, but the life cycle of concrete can't be beat in the fire ratings and so forth. So what can we do to concrete to improve it? And so there's efforts on making concrete lighter with more air. So there's no one product that's black and white. There's adjustments. Fly ash can be added to concrete to change its embodied carbon. Fly ash is the waste product of coal plants. And then of course, then some people argue, well, why should you promote the use of coal plants? You get the idea, and kind of how complicated it can be and how many interesting discussions people have and judging each other on their use of it. But if folks are advocates for trying to reduce carbon, this would be a way to talk about it from a kind of starting point on material selection and where things come from. Some other things that may come up that we hear about is ASHRAE a lot. ASHRAE is a professional organization, but where they come important is about their HVAC standards and ventilation. COVID has had, I think, I've heard ASHRAE more than I ever have outside of my work life because of they really are the ones able to give us the science on air changes and mechanical fresh air and so forth. Energy conservation measures are looking at the use of energy and water to be studied on efficiencies, the life cycle costs, and early modeling of different options. You'll compare energy conservation measures. EUI is the energy use intensity. So that's looking at how much the energy the building is going to use in a year. Someone described it well to me as a kind of a miles per gallon your building is getting. So lower numbers are, but it's the opposite of for cars. It's like lower numbers is using less energy, so therefore better. And then thinking about materials, to compare them, people are starting to ask more questions of what's in the material. And so I'm sitting at a table that is recycled wood, and that is, if it was, virgin wood, that would be good, but we've applied a sealer onto it. So what is made out of that sealer? So, and in the past, no one would tell us. They said, oh, it's, shellac or whatever. But now we're saying, no, you need to give us the ingredient list. So an HBD, which is a health product declaration, is whoever made it saying, oh, I used the following things to make this finish. Well, some people said, well, that's nice. You told us that that's what's inside the shellac, but I want a third party person to tell me the same chemistry list. And so that's where EPDs comes in, is that it's a verified third party. So it's great that you told me, but now, we're going to push you to pay to have someone verify it, because sometimes you tend to be vague. It's like food, right? We see our ingredient labels used to be super generic, and now people are pushing, look, what are those natural flavors you put in my cereal? Well, it turns out natural flavors can mean lots of things. And so we push these HBDs and EPDs to find out what the natural flavors. And unfortunately, sometimes we find out there's things that we wouldn't want to know that was, well, we want to know what's in there because we wouldn't eat it. And the building is the same way. There are things that are in buildings on materials that are dangerous to the final occupant. They can be dangerous to the folks installing them. And then consideration of who had to process it. So the folks in the factory and handlers, we want to make it as safe all the way through. And so this Living Building Challenge folks that have decided that there are some things that we should never see. And so they created a thing called a red list. And this is a long list that is being updated on a regular basis, saying we should never allow these things to be in our building. And so some architects have pledged to say, we're red list free building, and you have to, you know, and so that's the conversation on some folks have, and it can be a simple project, it could be, you know, healthcare, you know, there's a sensitivity, so all sorts of things from that. So it's not, none of these conversations are necessarily limited to a type of building, but it's the type of thing that the owners and occupants can have conversations and influence. And it isn't necessarily about price tags to ask for these. The getting HPDs and EPDs, manufacturers have enough people asking questions that they know that customers will come to them because they provide it. And the folks who don't, the market is finding that the pressure, people won't, you know, people won't work with them. And so that works in that way. So that's a lot thrown at it, but I want to pause for a second. And is there any kind of general questions on these types of things? Am I moving too
I
fast?
have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So as you think about, as sort of from the perspective of the architect, or, you know, thinking about the number of sort of stakeholders that the town of Wakefield will employ to do this project, who's asking those questions, and how do we make sure that those questions are being asked?
So the project will include community meetings, and then of which then people can speak up about. And then the town's representatives on giving us a project that we want is the permanent building committee and the high school project committee. So those folks are the ones that need to know that there's folks interested. So that's the conversation that, you know, because they're going to have a much more regular communication with the designers than we would. So it would be the suggestion to reach out to those folks and talk to them about concerns or requests, or just ask questions. Are you having these conversations, and so forth? So that's a good segue to the next. So this is the next two slides. The graphics were screen captioned from when the designers SMA was hired. So I have no idea if this is still accurate in terms of milestones of what their contract says, but this is kind of giving a starting point of how the process goes. So from the summer through June 2022 is a feasibility study. And during this time, the designers will be studying the town, the site, the program. There'll be a lot of work with the, you know, the school and its representatives who look at what are the needs in terms of quantity of classrooms, types of spaces. So, you know, there's a whole programming effort done, both at administrative level of school, and I can imagine that teachers and students will participate in that. But the feasibility study is likely to also include visioning. You know, what kind of school do you want? What, you know, what is the aspirations of the town? And those tend to be public meetings. And so you could speak up to those. And then, and from that, they start to get a sense of the options available for the town. For everything is on the table: renovation, addition, new construction. And this town, I imagine, will be not likely mentioned, but often some towns have to look at sites, you know, like, are we relocating the school for X, Y, or Z reasons? But my guess is that that's not a needed discussion. But I don't know, I'm not part of the meeting, but that's what I would expect. And then from that, there's a schematic design. That's where they take the information, they start to really provide drawings. And then there's they go to the state, they will have a budget and a town vote. The minute that process ends, opportunities for aspirational goals, emphasis on different things really changes. So it's between now and next fall is the influence of talking to project. And not to say that there isn't a lot of design and engineering done afterwards, but the goals need to be there, because when the town does its town vote, that budget is set. And not that aspirations necessarily have cost impact, it just changes. You know, you don't want somebody to say that there is a cost and then you have to worry about meeting the budget. So the study and schematic design is the point of, you know, kind of of which we can talk to things. And I do want to know that, so when SMA was interviewing, they are already thinking about sustainability options for this building without talking to us and knowing that everything could change. But their experience shows of how the building can be sustainable. They've already, they presented it. And so this is a section through one of their designs. And I shouldn't even say designs, just a concept to have the conversation. But you'll see that they're noting options from indoor air quality and talking about operable window values, high efficiency lighting. They're noting the carbon, embodied carbon discussion and how to reduce it, the net zero enclosure. So they're starting to already think about the R value, the insulation value of walls, roofs, outdoor space through gardens, triple painting glass, which would have a benefit from a thermal standpoint, a sound standpoint. The use of all electric, why not have that be explored? Water, potential for solar. Can the design impact something called urban heat effects? So the idea is that, when we pave over our cities, we're heating our cities because the sun comes down and just creates an oven. So what can we do from a building standpoint to limit that? And then EV charge. So, their experience and, their knowing kind of what they think Wakefield has them already starting to think about all the things that I've kind of already talked about. So we don't need to, we're not introducing anything they're not already knowledgeable about. And certainly they're, some of those folks are way more knowledgeable than me, so I would never pretend otherwise. But they don't know what Wakefield wants and what the interest, and there will be tough decisions, on cost and layout and schedule. And so knowing how we prioritize, but us starting first on our options and limitless discussion potentials, would be great for folks to start thinking about before they have those meetings. So that's the end of my, yep.
Oh, good. So Robin, I've got a couple of comments on, I think it is going to be important for this committee to come with not the laundry list of all of the things, right? Because we don't live in a community where money is, that we have a huge commercial tax base. Getting this, we don't want this high school project to be so expensive that people kind of freak out and don't support it. And so, and I'm already, like, I've seen how much the Stoneham High School is going to cost, which I think is something like 180 or 190 million dollars, which is crazy when you think about what the Galvin cost us. And so I worry a bit about kind of going in with this grand ideas. And that if it would be, to me, it feels like it would be a really good thing to have the committee come in with, like, we must do these few things because we think these are the most important, because otherwise I think someone else will decide kind of what can happen and what can fit into the budget. So I think that's one important role that this committee could come in with a point of view on, which is, like, we think it's really important that we get these 6 out of these 10 things, if possible. The other, go ahead, Robin. Actually, respond to that.
I was just going to say one thing that is super hard, and I, as a taxpayer in Wakefield, I'm going to be very aware of it too, is there's going to be sticker shock without a doubt. Things cost way more than one would ever have imagined for so many reasons. But we also need to think about life cycle costs. And so there is some things that we may want to think that it is more than we would have wanted to, but the consultants and designers, they can do studies to show that it will pay for itself in a few years. And I know that is hard for some people to see it because they won't feel like they realize it, but these buildings are very expensive to operate. The current building, I can't imagine what it costs. So you have to, if we can get the new building to cost less to operate than the old one, that while our sticker shock, we'll feel it in time. It's just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And I think the more we can talk about that, right, that the long-term benefit, it will be financial also, right? That there will be savings over time that we don't see. I think that we should absolutely be talking about that for particular parts of the project. My other question for you is, if we were to go down the renovation path instead of the build from scratch path, right? Because there isn't another site. There isn't a lot of interest in another site because of kind of the campus and the fields and all of that, right? So there, even if we had another site, I'm not sure that Wakefield would be terribly open to it. And so that leaves us in a situation where I think a renovation is a real possibility. And so when you went through all of those kinds of those things that would be possibilities, they feel like they're much more, or in many cases, oriented towards a brand new building. Am I just not thinking about that? And is it in fact that a renovation could include many of those elements that you just talked about on that last slide?
Yes. So there is a limit to some things, because then the cost to put a new system, something into an old building can outweigh it. But the entire building, in theory, could have its skin taken off and rebuilt, and that would then help thermally, acoustically, water tightness, air tightness, and that's still an existing guts, right? So that isn't, so you're not lost to thermal improvements, even if you keep the building guts. Without a doubt, the roof is replaced and put, a whole lot more insulation of different types, and so you're gonna have a better hat on your building. Embodied carbon advocates actually said the best way to reduce the carbon usage is to start with existing guts, because there's so much already invested in the building. If the layout of a building, the accessibility, the potential for hazardous materials, I'm not saying there is, but if there's a potential for hazardous materials throughout the building, the effort to get it out starts to outweigh that. You know what I'm saying? That's when you get into those details of comparing them to. But all three design firms that applied to the project did create some theoretical what ifs of new construction and things to think about of ad reno. They're both viable, and both could be more or less expensive. They aren't necessarily, neither one is guaranteed to be more expensive than the other, because there's just so much involved with it. I don't, it's different, but just a case study. So the city of Lowell, the project I'm working on, we're doing their high school, and they went through the study process before I was on the project, before I was hired, and they came to the end of the study and said, we're building a new building on their football area. I don't know what exactly it was. And that's where they were. And the advocates who wanted the existing site downtown Lowell then spoke up, and they reversed it. So they went through all the way through the study. They had a change in political leadership, and then we were hired to do the study to stay at the existing building. And that's what our project is. It's an addition renovation to their existing high school project, because despite the pros and cons that they evaluated, the public's perception changed, and the investment became an ad reno. So, do we still hear some public, whispers, on social media saying, it would have been better if you had a new building? Sure. But I'm sure had that happened, then people said we miss being downtown. So, there's communities are doing both for different reasons. And so without knowing more, I wouldn't even know where the high school, I can't predict where the high school is going to end up.
Yeah, nor can I. I know that there's, because we don't have natural alternative sites, and some money has been invested in the fields, right? We don't have a lot of options in Wakefield for that high school. And we want to keep it in that like complex area. So I just wanted to make sure, and now you saying that totally makes sense, right? If you keep the guts, I just don't know where the students would go while you're doing a massive renovation, right? So you got to figure that out. But to keep the guts of that building and then try to renovate all of it would be amazing, and would seemingly reduce kind of at least the waste and some of the emissions that you talked about. But so regardless, I just wanted to make sure that with either option,
Yep.
we really do have the ability to kind of build a more sustainable building, and it being a renovation doesn't really limit us much.
So going back to my project C, so when we, I got hired at the end of Schematic, and we were doing, it's a lead project, and, oh, sorry. We actually split the project in half and said, okay, the existing building, we're going to go after lead credits, and we're going to fill out a separate form for the new construction portion, because we assumed that they actually wouldn't be equal on lead. And what we found through our study was that the existing building got credits for reuse of buildings, but other things they didn't qualify for. And the new construction did have some performance improvements because there was a limit to what we could do to a 1920s historic building, but then didn't get credits for others. And so they came out to be almost the same. They're within 1 point of each other. So from a paperwork standpoint, we combined the project and we're doing one lead checklist. So there are things that you'll benefit from one or the other. And so sustainably, they could both work. Certainly, you're going to, relook at all your HVAC systems and the potential for going electric and reduction of gas and, and kind of going from there. I think that what the town learned, elementary school did recently to be re-roof, and they hope to do PV, photovoltaics.
Greenwood.
Right. So there are people like, oh my God, we're doing a roof. Why aren't we doing photovoltaics? And that is the time to put them on a roof, is when you lay down a new roof. But they evaluated and said, wait a minute, a roof of this age can't support it. So they still could have done it. We could have added structure to that building, I imagine, to make it support the weight, but that wasn't an investment that made sense at the time for other reasons. So it wasn't because it was an old building, it just meant that it cost more to prepare it, but it's still potentially, and I know this without any engineering, but I'm sure it would have proven that they could have. It just, whereas that's the first cost versus life cycle cost analysis that needs to get done.
Yeah.
So the improvement to an existing could make things not make sense. I just don't know. But those are exactly the type of questions to be asking the designer to evaluate. So when they're looking at the energy conservation measures, whether it's envelope, energy, water, whatever, it's, did you think about, do we have that information on life cycle to really see it?
Robin, question for
Oh, sorry,
you.
go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Tom.
When the designers are doing the building and putting forth the different systems, and this kind of goes to Susie's question, around sticker shock, will they kind of give here's the operational modeling for the building today to heat it and cool it? It's costing, whatever that number is.
Yep.
Per year. And then, if you put in, system, 1 and system 2, a good, better, best type of system, here's the upfront cost of, system 1, and here's its operational cost. Here's the upfront cost of system 2. And
absolutely. Yep.
I want
to say they even, I'm trying to find it. In their interview, they actually demonstrated on another project. They gave a case study of this town was interested. This town had this option. We looked at this option and this awesome first cost, life cycle cost, and cost per square foot kind of differences and so forth. And if they didn't, others do. But I feel comfortable to say that they will do it. Yeah. So here, so this is the type of thing that we create. Oh no, it's this. So this is actually one of the other designers that went after the project. It was their evaluation matrix on comparing reno, and new construction. And they created a matrix that looks at the pros and cons educationally, location-wise, impacted towns, so traffic. This included some redistricting. Security, pros and cons of the different options, and then cost. So these are the types of matrices that are all done during that study of as a way to evaluate and come to the decision on, where they should proceed.
I was going to ask the scorecards, with respect to the scorecards, do they typically provide those, or do we need to request that as part of the process? And
Oh,
if
no.
so,
So, yeah,
do we say we prefer, this scorecard? I was just wondering how.
Oh, in terms of which one, I don't know. I've never been part of the process when it's come up to this, which one to do. If there was a reason someone wanted one over the other, I think you could ask the question. I am curious of why the Galvin went chips. I just never done a chips building. I only know of it, that it's an option, but I do know that the nuance of it is a little different. So maybe whatever that nuance was, it scored better, or maybe it was easier for them to achieve the requirements. I don't know. I can't say. I do know that chips looks at acoustics differently in a building. That is an indoor environmental quality looked at, is how classrooms are isolated from hallways, so kids can focus and not be distracted by whatever happens in hallways. And I know that the technical end of what they need, chips, is different than LEED. So,
Okay.
I imagine they'll ask the question, but
yeah, like decision, sort of helping us think about, what is important to us and what do we weight, we collectively, and we the people, I guess, in terms of interest for the building. If there's this window of opportunity, it sounds like through next, I think October, you said, to.
Right. And I want to say this. They created that schedule probably based on the RFP they responded to. I have no idea what they were contracted with, and I mean, tonight they're having, I think, a kickoff meeting with the permanent building committee. So, they'll establish, so they're saying next fall town meeting, but, but it is kind of the sooner rather than later kind of is the best way to ask questions. And the U.S., so MSBA, the Mass State Building Authority, who gives us the grants money, they look at LEED and chips. But the other ones you can learn, that's my point, was that you can learn from them and ask questions, even if it's not. Checklists are only so good, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about, how do we help inform, like, how do we influence this? And then, to Tom's point, I do think sort of the long-term net present value of the project, if you will, or 10-year ROI, because the operating costs, as we know, for a lot of these environmental investments are cheaper long-term than other alternatives. And so how do we get them to produce that? Is that a request as part of the process that we have them lay out? I think that alone would be successful, because that way it would make it easier to pick and choose the options, quite frankly. So if we know, yes, upfront, there's a big sticker item, but we know this is going to be, the cost incurred over 10 years is going to be a lot less than if we paid a lot less upfront for something that's not as environmentally friendly. But I think, from my perspective, I wouldn't be able to pick an option unless I knew that information. I do think they go hand in hand. Like, I
mean, they have so much experience working with communities in Massachusetts, and then kind of regionally. They know what questions every community has, because communities, no one has a town full of architects, engineers, and even amongst them there would be people disagreeing on what people should, how far push the envelope, push the goal. So they know that people need to be comfortable with it, but that they need the data back behind it. So I think the the permanent building committee is the one that kind of is their client, but that's not to say that the permanent building committee are representatives. So we talk to them and say, I'm concerned, I have questions. They have a opportunity to speak, I think, at most of their meetings, and we can ask those questions. Have you looked at different enough systems? And mechanically, it actually, it's buildings of a certain size, it actually gets into a few categories pretty quickly because some things don't make sense at different scales. But each will have impacts and pros and cons. So, you know, do they have that? And these engineers and architects are going to give that to you. If they don't make it on the public, they will have done it behind the scenes. They would have it available. Because they want the building to be successful too, you know.
Yeah.
This is such a fascinating conversation, and thank you. And I apologize, my phone and my computer just froze, so I apologize for if it was a little jarring, if I disappeared for a while. But I guess one question I had, Robin, is so when you showed those rating scales, and again, I come from healthcare, so I'm really, but at least in healthcare, we have like some things that are like easy boxes to check that are kind of meaningless, but make you look good. And so I sort of think of those as a little bit of red flags. And so I'm wondering if there are sort of like those types of investments that would sort of minimize the overall environmental impact, like to Susie's point of like making sure that we ask for things wisely. And so are there things that are like, you know, that people gravitate toward because they're easier or cheaper, but actually aren't very effective, that we should sort of be cognizant of, that when we ask for things, that we ask for something more?
So, and I only can speak to LEED because my experience, but I imagine it's true for all of them. Yes, there's a range in the credits and how much it costs to implement. But as LEED is aged, the super easy ones are gone and they're now prerequisites. So to be a certified LEED project, which actually we can't even go to certified, the state is going to want something more than that. You already are getting a lot, you know, that this is, you know, similar to when we were talking about the stretch code, the Massachusetts building code is light years what it used to be, right? And then we said, no, we want to go more. So to get into the system is already, I mean, there's even a difference of the Galvin 10 years ago than what this is. So I wouldn't worry that it could fill with a lot of fluff. But there are fluff, for lack of better words, but some of them the project won't qualify for. And I don't want to minimize what those credits are because they actually are important. But if the high school is where it is located now, we won't get some credits about its location because it's not walkable to any businesses. Not a lot of kids live around it. It has one bus route, you know, a public transportation. And so it's not a great site from a vehicular, you know, for access to the town, it's not great. You know, when we draw a radius around it, there's not a lot there. And so, you know, to urban projects, that is an easy free credit because they just prove that they're surrounded by lots of things. And so that's off the table for us. But giving enough bicycle racks and making showers available for people who bike to school is probably pennies, and that's a credit. So, and they do weigh the credits a little bit, you know, so you don't feel like the bicycle is the same thing as the range and mechanical, but there are sometimes you get the same credit for a lot less work, but all of it is of value. So does that help?
Yeah, that's great. And I just would love, I mean, if we had like a way to enable kids to bike to school, although, you know, especially once you get safe streets going.
Well, and that's, I meant to mention that. So the bike credit actually has gotten harder because they want a safe route to the bike to school. And so it requires bike lanes within a certain distance from the school. And so, you know, that's something that town, unrelated to this project, can be exploring, studying, and implementing and have it ready for the project, you know? So that's, the project would never bear the cost of doing bike lanes to, you know, it's outside the perimeter of the building or of the job site. But without it, you lose the bike credit, which seems silly because you want kids to safely be able to bike to the high school. So I think that's that's like, that would be something like, would be foolish not to make sure we get, because it's so kids can use it, you know? So there's an operational and a wellness value to it too, right? That, exercise for the kids, parents not stressed out about getting their kids to school, but knowing it's a safe way to do it.
Robin, have you seen when they do the public input community meetings, are they usually general, or is it something where we could ask to sponsor kind of an environmental aspects of the project, or maybe co-sponsor it or co-host it with the permanent building, or are they all pretty much free for alls or general? Not free for all.
I don't know how this,
general.
I don't know how this firm works. Based on listening to lots of different firms interview for projects, most of them have explained that they are focused on different things. So I would imagine that would be the case, but I don't know.
Okay.
It would be really hard to facilitate something that wasn't focused, and kind of foolish to do that because you wouldn't make sure you're the right people in the room, right?
Right,
You-
right.
you
So I'm
want-
wondering whether we go to the permanent building and say, we'd like we'd like you to hold an environmental community meeting on the school.
I was
I don't know
just
how you
thinking,
do that, and to Susie's, not that, just to listen. I mean, we're not going to come in asking for anything, but just, you've taught us so much today.
So folks that are on the school, now I'm going to get to acronyms on the high school project permanent committee, which is, when your
Yeah, the
husband
sub-
is
the
on.
sub-
Yeah. So I would imagine he's invited to all of them. So he would have a better sense of the calendar than we could. And so he may learn how they're planning on organizing it. The ones that'll come probably first are related to programming, envisioning,
Education.
the
Yeah,
school part of it, which isn't fair because it's all the school, but
like the
educational visioning
yeah.
and stuff like that. And they use a wonderful consultant that my office is used to, who will do that, and then they'll do it. I'm sure that they'll do one that's actually called sustainability, and that they are likely to do a town-wide invitation, because they know that there'll be folks that will only want to talk about that, and they want the input. I mean, that's in a successful project is when the town gets invested in it positively. But I would lean on folks that know people on those committees to keep in the loop if we can't listen in on everything.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Robin. And I think we'll have further questions, but it really was helpful. And I want to move us along because I want to be cognizant of people's time too. And we want to talk a little bit about our committee and sort of structure going forward. But any other last minute questions or thoughts for Robin? Luckily, she's not going anywhere. All right, I want to see if I can share my screen. Oh, so Robin, you are the host because I got kicked off. And so I'm wondering if you either can enable me to be the host, a co-host, or whether you could share the Excel document.
You should be now.
There I am. Brilliant. Thank you. So the next agenda item that we were going to talk about today was really around the structure of our committee. And this is the same document that we talked about last meeting. And thank you all, those of you who sort of followed up with me with your thoughts about where the priorities are. I think what we want to do today is just confirm where people have said that the priorities are, have any other sort of thoughts from people about where we think there's potential in the coming year, and then talk about setting up potentially subcommittees as a way to get some of the work done in between meetings, and just sort of keep us moving forward and building some momentum around these topics. And so what we talked about last time was that these four at the top that I put in green are sort of ongoing. You all are doing a lot of work on them. Thanks to Julie and to Rob and Melissa and Robin, who are doing a lot of work. So these are sort of ongoing, and we don't feel like there's probably a committee work around these. Although we hope that we can we as a committee can stay up to date on these as through the updates section. of our meetings. But I think what we were really talking about was these sort of potential new priorities. And what I heard from people, and I apologize, I should have reordered this Excel spreadsheet, but what I heard from people that the priorities that you all are interested in working on, and I think that's the key for our committee, is sort of where we can put some time. I heard sort of potentially a committee around zero, the sort of waste reduction, following up on this ideas of waste reduction in our community, building on some of the momentum around that, potentially with a focus on the town buildings. This idea of land protection. So, and we talked about last time about, that's both about making sure that our lands are protected, that our lands are used appropriately, our public lands, and then really thinking maybe most, in the shorter term around the Butler Avenue property, and thinking about, is there an opportunity to advocate for some retaining some of that land and maybe a park or something there. So thinking about that sort of as one committee. The community sort of event and sort of engagement of the public, especially around a community litter pickup day in the spring, and potential sort of other Earth Day events, I think was another one that sort of came out and people were excited about. And so I guess I'm coming with a proposal that we have those 3 subcommittees in addition to the ongoing work of the other committees. And I didn't know if other people have thoughts. I put the food rescue as a sort of longer term, to Susie's point of, we don't really have access to schools, and it's not, the schools are doing everything they can do right now. And so that would maybe be sort of delayed until next year, or perhaps later this year, but not now. So what do people think about those 3 priorities? Do those feel like the right ones? Do you feel like I'm channeling you, those of you who responded?
Can you just go up, go?
Yes. Sorry. I could probably figure out a way to make it smaller so you can see it all.
So just walk, so the 3 again are?
Sort of waste reduction.
Yeah.
That would be line 10.
Right.
The land protection,
Right.
including Butler Avenue. And
Yep.
then sort of grouping together sort of the community, the litter cleanup day, the sort of public communication, sort of engaging the public in some of these events.
Okay. No, I just got confused when I saw the zoning. I didn't want that to be one of the ones. Okay. I personally think these look great.
I agree. It doesn't feel like you're trying to do too much, right? If it gives the committee a little bit of focus. And I think, I was one of the people who had been pushing for subcommittees, only because I know how well they work on the school committee side. It's where a lot of actual work gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of put people in smaller groups where you can focus, a couple of times between your monthly meetings to try to move things forward. I think you can really kind of see a difference in feeling like you're making progress.
And I'll just say, I know, Rob and I had this conversation a lot when he was chair, when do you actually get into subcommittees? And I think it's time to do that. We've definitely been around enough. And I think that by posting them, it gets a little cumbersome, right, with the open meeting laws. But I actually think that you post these and maybe we expand our world a little bit and other people can come and get involved. So we had a lot of input for the new positions, and maybe there's a way to get more people involved in subcommittees kind of before they go into the full membership.
Yeah, so
We have to sustain interest, right? Because there's 4 of us that are up for reappointment, and
That's
in April it's going to be intense competition. So I think, without other comment, I think maybe I make a motion to say we as a committee are going to develop 3 subcommittees And then in terms of process, I'll follow up with people who I think express some interest in sort of thinking about, who will be the actual membership of each subcommittee. Feel free to say no, or, let me know, but I feel like I got a sample of people who might be interested, and I can ask others. So
I'll second it.
I was saying, actually, Myra can't make a motion since she's the chair. So,
All right, thank you, Tom. So Robin will make a motion.
Did not know that as
yeah,
a chair that you can't make, I literally did not know that. How did
I did not either. That was something I learned this year.
I'll second
I
the
didn't know.
motion.
Is that you, Mary?
Yes.
all right, so this is a motion to establish 3 subcommittees as a part of the ESC. So I'll do roll call. Dan, you're first on my screen now. You are muted.
Yes.
So I'm second, yes. Robin,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Sophie, you don't get to vote, but I appreciate you volunteering for subcommittees too. Tom
Yes.
and Rob
Yes.
and Addie, I'm going to follow up with you too, because we really want your voice in here.
All right.
All right. Thank you all very much. And I think I agree with Julie. I think it's something that's been a long time coming, and I think it will really help us. So thank you to our new members also for driving, pushing us in that direction too. Let me pull up the agenda. I think our next discussion is on
Power plant.
potential on the peaker power plant.
Mhm.
And so I think the question is here, do we have a role as a committee to play in thinking about the peaker plant and what's
Has the ship sailed on the power plant? Because I heard news last week that wasn't good.
I can give a little update. So the DPU, Department of Public Utilities, did approve bonding authority for the power plant. Maybe Tom, you probably know more about it than I do. So technically, they have everything they need to build. There is still a big movement, I would say, to encourage either the governor's office or the legislature or others to continue to look at options. And there's petitions going around. So technically, if MWEC doesn't start building by, I think it's next fall, then the New England ISO, the grid operator, and or the Department of Environmental Protection could both revisit their permits and their permissions. So if it continues to get delayed through, activism or delays in equipment or any number of things, then there are reopening points. And there's always, politics that just where they just say we don't want to build anything new like that. So I would say that it's mostly sailed, but there is still some, there's still some people trying to use political force. Tom, would you agree? What do you know from the
funding
NLD standpoint?
Yeah, the DPU approved the bond funding. You are correct on those dates, although there was an update which I didn't get yet because I missed my last board meeting. But that is correct as well. And then just from a perspective of the current gas and light board, This was put into place when 4 of the current 5 board members were not part of it. This current board hasn't officially taken a vote on its stance. So this particular board in force doesn't have a stance other than the stance of we voted the project in as a board in 2016. Some things that may not necessarily just, for general FYI, even if the project does not go forward, unfortunately, the Wakefield ratepayers will still be on the hook for a potential commitment that we've already made. So there is financial impact even if the project does not get built as well.
So where I think Melissa was coming from this was kind of part of the concerns that people have about this was inconsistencies with new legislation around environmental justice areas, but also that there was really not a full-fledged environmental and health assessment done. And I know there's no chat in our thing here, but the Peabody Board of Health has asked the state to conduct a health assessment. Essentially, it goes down to air quality. Essex County has some of the worst air quality actually in the country, and so they're asking to look at what the impact of this power plant, which will be built near to existing power plants, so there's cumulative effects, is simply asking for the state to do a study on that. And so I think what maybe this committee could do, or citizens can always do, is just ask our Board of Health to support the state doing a study, no kind of value statement on what we think as a committee or what the health department, but that how do we make decisions without having that study done. So I've been super involved, so I don't want to lead this. This is really this committee's.
So Julie, has there been an environmental study too of a sort of environmental impacts of the plant?
No, because it is located at a site with existing power plants, fossil power plants. The Secretary for Energy and Environment, prior to this secretary, determined that there was no need for an environmental assessment. Even though it's 100 feet from a river. And at the time that was done, there was no legislation around cumulative impact. So unfortunately, what's likely to happen, this is a peaker plant. So this is a plant that doesn't run all the time. It only runs when, there's a high need for electricity. But it will likely run at the exact same time as the other plants. So this is natural gas as the primary fuel and oil as the backup fuel. However, we all know that natural gas is constrained in the winter in New England, and more peakers are moving to winter. So there is some potential that it will operate on oil. But it will not operate all the time.
And
so the short answer is no, there was no EIA.
One thing to kind of ties into our peak demands, shave the peak. The more that we can shave that peak and reduce that demand during those peak, the less likely that something like this will have to run. Which is why those types of programs are important. One thing I don't know if it was shared with this committee or not, due to the activism and all of the publicity around this and everyone asking questions and stuff, the Peabody light plant has agreed, if this plant does go online, that they will retire one of their older units, peaker units, so they call it Unit 1 on that site, which was not something that they were planning to do before. So I think that's a little bit of a win as well.
All right, maybe what we do is circulate around what the Peabody Health Department has done.
Mm-hmm.
so people can look at it, because I think the most that we might want to ask our health department to do is support what the Peabody Board of Health is doing. You know, so basically Wakefield's buying the power from this, but we're really putting all the environmental and health impacts on Peabody.
Mhm.
And so do we just ask our Board of Health to simply support the Peabody Board of Health in what they're requesting, since it's their citizens that are going to be impacted by this? So, but I think we can't, I mean, I personally, there's a lot to this, and I've been studying this for a long time, but I would want you guys to look at everything before we would take a vote. I can work with Melissa and make sure that all gets around.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, there's not a ton of urgency. I mean, there is some urgency, but not a lot of urgency. And our health department, I will say, we're down to 2 people. So we're only 2 out of the 3 right now, and they're dealing with COVID. But I think if we could get this, you know, in maybe the next meeting, really talk about it in more detail, or invite them to maybe come, and maybe one person they couldn't both come because it would be considered a joint meeting, but maybe one person could kind of come and just hear what the thoughts are.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
I will reach out to them and see if they might be interested and able.
Okay.
All right. I know we lost Susie, which is fine. I think the internet's a little bit in and out, but I'm wondering if we can do some quick updates on the green community application. Julie, is there anything?
Quick update. We are in the middle of doing the energy audit, which is the baseline we need to be able to then make our plan to reduce it to meet the green community requirement. That's going to take about another month and a half. And so we are beginning to write the grant, and then hoping that once we get that data in and have that plan on, then we can still make the end of the year deadline. The only other outstanding, and we talked about it last time, was the fleet policy, which, because this audit is now taking a couple months, is not as urgent. It's not going to go up on the September 13th meeting, but hopefully it'll be on the September 27th meeting, and we'll still have to have the schools pass it. Tom, I think I've determined that the light department does not have to pass it, but I think it would be excellent if it did, kind of in a solidarity kind of.
I agree. It will, when town council passes it, and you know the finalized policy, that will come before my board.
Yeah,
and we'll
exactly.
vote
So
on
that's really it. We are on track to get that in by the end of the year.
Great. So Melissa's not here, so we'll skip the next one. Sophie and Addie, first of all, happy first day of your senior year. I think you're both seniors. So although anything that you all want to chime in other than how was it? I hope it was a good day.
Thank you. Yes, it was. Lots of icebreakers, lots of asking our favorite songs and food.
Yeah.
I had one thing. I actually just talked to our recycling club leader, like the teacher advisor today, and she said that she wants to get everything back up and going, because I know last year we couldn't really meet. So I think we're gonna have a meeting on Tuesday to hopefully recruit new members and start recycling and collecting everything again.
Great.
Yeah, I second that from Sophie. Sophie and I will probably end up being the leaders of the recycling club, the student leaders. So it'll be easy for us to connect if we want to. But yeah, school is pretty good. I think Sophie and I both like our classes. We're excited about our choices. So yeah, thank you.
That's great. I had a little conversation with a Woodville teacher today as I was doing pickup, having done a little bit of trash pickup around the Woodville school before school started. We're gonna, I think, do a little bit of a student, trying to engage some of the elementary school kids too in helping clean up a little bit around there because it's pretty embarrassing. And so we had a great conversation about how, we really want to enable the kids to do some learning in the woods right by the school, and that part of that feels like we just need to spend a little time cleaning it up. I'll share some pictures. My 6-year-old was really excited about doing it one day last week. I
Hey,
don't know if
Myra.
you- Yeah,
It's Susie. I'm back on. I don't know what happened there, but the whole internet is down here, so I'm on with my phone. So I apologize for that. Just in Sophie and Addie talking about the recycling club getting going again. You know, I have been kind of reluctant around the food rescue and composting in the schools and all of that, only because of the kind of the need for volunteers to really kind of make that happen at the elementary level. But I don't think that that precludes us from thinking about it at the high school level. If Sophie and Addie, you guys wanted to try to take that on, and the teacher advisor was, you know, interested in it. And so I don't want anybody to think that I was shutting that down in our last meeting, because I left the last meeting feeling like that's how I came across. And I really think I meant that only kind of where you rely on outside volunteers, that I didn't think that it was you know, appropriate to think that we could do anything in the elementary schools. So I would love, Addie and Sophie, if you guys feel like that's something you would want to expand the recycling club to think about, to maybe talk it over with the advisor and see if there's even the smallest of things that we might be able to do at the high school that could get that kind of program going.
Certainly, we can bring it up at our meeting on Tuesday. And I know before, when we started doing it before COVID and everything, she was all for it and had even tried doing it beforehand and wasn't successful. So I'm sure she'd be on board with it, but we can always double check to make sure.
Okay, that's great news. I didn't want anybody to think that I was shutting that down with kind of the way that I talked about it last time, because I feel like I came on a little strong. So that's great to hear, Sophie. And I think if you have support at the teacher level and you have support at the club level, you guys should do you know, do what you can there and leverage this committee to help you where we can.
Yes, definitely. We can 100% try that.
Okay, great.
that's great. And Susie, I don't think any of us, at least I didn't take it in any way. I appreciate your sort of realism and the recognition of, you know, all the schools are dealing with. So I apologize if I made it seem like I interpreted your comments with any kind of negativity.
No, it was really me after the fact thinking, wow, I came out with some pretty strong language about that. Like, if the high schoolers want to do it, you guys could absolutely make that happen, and we should help you do it. So that's great. I'm like super psyched, Sophie, to hear that the teacher is kind of interested in getting things going again. That's great news.
And there may be a compost bucket hanging, like if compost was part of that plan, there may be the stuff for food rescue and the stuff for compost is likely sitting at the Woodville somewhere. And we could certainly sort of move it over, or, you know, think about leveraging those if, you know, so let's maybe, Sophie, I'll connect with you and just see if that's useful.
Sounds good.
Myra, you touched on what I was going to ask Rob. Rob, I think I remember you saying that the Black Earth contract that was remaining for the elementary could be transferred to, say, the high school, if that's something that they wanted to pick up.
Yeah, as far as I know, the barrels are still there. And I think part of the new agreement with them is there is a new contract with them for all the schools, but I think it's just on hold. So we could double check that. When everything shut down, we'd already prepaid for, I forget how many months right now. So that's easy to transfer that over and just continue at the high school. And there was discussion about the middle school as well. At one point, we the end of last year, we spoke to some students who were interested in starting it at the middle school. Do you remember that, Susie? We had a group of kids, one of the classes. But
You're probably high schoolers by now.
oh, okay.
I don't know.
All right. Well, they can help at the high school then. Okay.
Well, there's always the civics class if this comes up, and so
Yeah.
somebody can reach out to who, I don't know who does it now, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry
Jason,
about
right?
that.
Pavey.
Yep, Jason Pavey. So at the middle school level, I think you have to realize that project is kind of more conceptual than focused on execution. So I think that there were students who were interested in the idea as part of their civics project. I don't know that we would have been able to get that kind of off the ground there. But I do think that if the high school if we could get a model at the high school level that we might be able to bring down to the Galvin, that might be an interesting way to do it. And the civics projects will come back around next spring where we could see it come back up at the middle school. But I think
Okay.
that one's going to be a little bit harder to get going unless there's a creation of some kind of like environmental club. Where if that were to happen, then we might be able to figure out a way to get it going. But I don't believe a club like that exists at the Galvin.
Okay. All right. Well,
John, I see your hand raised, so.
Oh, I just, if this is something that the students are interested in doing beyond composting, I don't know what the potential for food rescue is. I just wanted to offer that. In my day job, I work with graduate students in food policy and food and agriculture issues, and several of them have experience with food rescue work. So, you know, if there was an interest among the students to set up some systems, I could help with capacity building on that.
oh, that's great.
Great.
Very cool. Susie, do you have other updates?
I really don't have other updates. I will say that at one of our last meetings, I did kind of give the group an update around the policy related to the green communities, related to the vehicles. Julie, that we had talked briefly about. So I am still kind of waiting on if there's a policy that's going to need to be reviewed. But I
Yes.
have, yeah. So
Yeah, so we're gonna do that more towards the end of September. I'll reach out to you. We've got time.
Okay, perfect. And I think that's really it, because the other big thing that we talked about last time was the high school project, and then this discussion about kind of food rescue and composting at the high school. So I think that covers everything for me.
And happy first day to you as well.
No, thank you.
You made
We
it through.
survived.
Tom. Gas and light?
You skipped
Oh,
town
sorry, I
council.
skipped Julie. I'm sorry, Julie.
It's okay. I don't think I have a lot, except that I was at the vocational school today because they were supposed to have a big meeting for their upcoming project, which is going to be huge. But they had a gas leak at the school, so we ended up not really having much of a meeting except a briefing in the rain in the parking lot. So first rule, no gas in these new schools.
Julie, just so you know, because I was talking to Jen Calais last week,
Yeah.
they are planning gas in the new Voc, and a lot of it.
Yeah, she and I were talking about that
Okay.
earlier today. Which is interesting because they're going to be a lead silver, they said, but obviously we now know you can get to the points in many different ways. So
Exactly. Yep.
but anyway, so that was that. I just wanted to bring up that kind of lead silver and the gas thing. I really hope that we can, use electric in the new high school for Wakefield, but we, those are the kinds of questions we can ask. That will also be on the town meeting. Town meeting's likely to be November 6th. Put it on your agenda.
I'll point out that it was a propane and not natural gas.
I don't know I honestly don't know whether it was propane or natural gas. The MGLD was not there, so it may have been propane.
Yeah, no, it was a propane.
It was propane.
Yeah, today was propane. Yeah.
Yeah, not that it's but yeah.
But the
It
project moving
confirmed the
forward
need
is looking
for
at
a new
gas.
road as well, because we were all in all kinds of traffic. That's all I have.
Now, Tom, your time to shine.
All right. Just two updates. One for Robin asked a question last meeting on the green choice. As of when the report was pulled at the end of July, there was 40 customers signed up for that. So it's there. And then on the 2020A solar project that we are also a member community of, unfortunately, that has been delayed. It was supposed to go online towards the end of this year. It is probably now, we're now looking towards spring, early summer next year in 2022.
Why was it delayed?
There was contractual stuff going back and forth. A lot of things that actually that MWEC did for protection of the 6 communities that are participating. So some of the stuff that was kind of not around for 2015A, they've taken to heart. So there's was just a lot of back and forth and contractual work. And then now, we're coming up on winter and ordering of supplies. So they're going to start doing some groundwork this fall. But the system won't, is not looking like it will come online until 2022 in the spring, summer timeframe.
Tom, what is this project? So
Sorry,
16
I should reference back. So 2020A, Wakefield's back in, I forget when it was. I think it was November of last year. The board voted on. It is a 6 megawatt solar project that is being built out in Ludlow, Mass. And then, so it was, like 2015A, it is offered up to, the member communities of MWEC. We chose to participate in that. So, Wakefield will be a part owner of that solar installation out there.
For our new members, can you define MWEC?
So MWEC is the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company. There are actually, so they service municipal electric companies. There's actually 2 companies like that. So about half of the communities belong to the MWEC organization and the other half belong to E&E. They are kind of our clearinghouse advisor. So we end up purchasing power from them. They, put together these projects that we, member communities participate in, in ownership of generation and transmission assets as well. So. Those were my 2 updates, unless anyone had any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm remembering from a couple meetings ago, you talked about light pollution and maybe like some new lights on Foundry Street. I could be remembering.
Yeah, no, you are remembering correct. So there are, as part of the Albion corridor, the gas and lights in conjunction with the town designs new street lighting, and that corridor goes from Albion all the way down to Lake Street, so including Foundry and is that Foster off to the right? I forget the one off the Tuttle off to the right there as well. As like everything else, COVID has impacted. They believe that the lights have been ordered, but it was something. It was like a 22-month lead time. I forget it was. So when they arrive, they will go up. As you can notice, as Albion, there are the foundations for them as they go up, or as they're finishing Albion. You'll see the foundations for the lights, and then when the poles and lights show up, we'll install them with the project.
Great, thank you.
And they are what they call why am I blanking on?
Are they acorn style?
Sorry?
Are they acorn style?
I don't believe so. No, they're downward facing.
Okay.
There was, I think it's been taken down, but there was kind of a sample light that was up on Albion for a while for people to look at and evaluate, but the lights don't produce light pollution. So.
Thank you. Anne, any updates from DPW?
Just a couple. The cardboard collection at the pit is going very well. It's very popular. Wednesday, it actually bulked out and we couldn't take any more. So we're in the hunt for a bigger container. Hopefully that'll be around the corner shortly. And we're also trying to put together a fall rain barrel and compost sale. We had great success in the spring. Over, I think, 225 units of either compost, composters and rain barrels were sold. So we're thinking maybe holiday gifts for the fall. And I talked to Melrose today, and we're thinking of doing it in conjunction with them and try to put forces together and sell 100 of them.
Great, thank you. I love the idea, like a little compost bucket under the tree.
Yeah.
The holiday gift. Do you know how many Black Earth?
Yeah, we're at 164 this morning.
Great. And Rob, any updates from Clean Lake Committee?
No, we haven't met.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. I'll try and get something for next meeting, but see if we can get some updates from someone.
No problem. I know that, I mean, I know the Clean Lake Committee or some version of it was working, I think, with the planning board. I don't know if that's actually happening.
I was talking to the planning board early on. They were talking about having. I don't actually. I haven't got an update because I haven't spoken to them in a while. So I'll get one and get it for the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Right.
So our next meeting is October 8th. If that continues to conflict with the Permanent Building Committee, especially as we think about trying to attend those meetings, just let me know and we can find another time. I don't know if they're on a regular schedule or whether they change as needed. Other matters not anticipated. Great. Well, thank you again, and thank you to Robin for that really helpful presentation. And to you all for the subcommittee work and really thinking about how to push this forward. So I really appreciate it.
Can I just, I love that having opening the meeting with something like that. We should think about other people we can invite or expertise that we have in this room, like, you know, Sean with the food rescue, or what, I mean, it's so interesting. Okay. Motion to adjourn. I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second.
All right, I will call on my screen. So Dan, you're up first.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Robin?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And Rob?
Yes.
All right. Oh, and Susie.
Oh, yes.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great night.